Get me off your lap, Charlotte. This is a massive human resources violation. I gasped, my face burning with a heat that could melt polar ice caps. Charlotte laughed softly, her hands sliding around my waist to lock me in place. I am the owner of this company, Fiona. I am the human resources department. My brain completely flatlined. How did my supposedly clumsy, useless intern end up holding my career and my body entirely hostage? Chapter 1. The Useless Intern. My third triple-shot iced Americano of the morning was the only thing standing between me and committing a corporate felony. I stared at the glowing screen of my monitor, my fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard like a concert pianist on a frantic sugar rush. At Apex Creative Group, survival meant being faster, sharper, and meaner than the useless middle managers sliding down the hallway. Fiona, my superstar. The voice belonged to Greg Sterling, our marketing director. He was a man whose entire contribution to the company consisted of stealing my ideas, mispronouncing the word synergy, and wearing suits that smelled faintly of expensive gin and cheap cologne. I didn't look up from my screen, my voice dropping into its standard, icy corporate register. Good morning, Greg. If this is about the Vanguard account, the projection models are 98% complete. Oh, forget the models for a second, Greg said, waving his hand dismissively. He stepped into my glass-walled cubicle, and that was when I noticed the shadow hovering just behind him. I have a tiny favor to ask. Meet your new shadow. I finally raised my eyes, ready to deliver a cutting remark about headcount budgets. The words died in my throat. The woman standing behind Greg did not look like she belonged in a cramped, fluorescent-lit marketing department. She looked like she had just wandered off a Milan runway. She wore an ivory silk blouse that looked suspiciously like real Hermes, tailored black trousers, and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses perched on the bridge of a perfectly straight nose. Her dark hair was gathered in a loose, effortlessly elegant twist, and her lips were painted a shade of red that felt less like makeup and more like a declaration of war. This is Charlotte, Greg announced, beaming as if he had personally birthed her. She's our new intern. No marketing background, but she's highly recommended. I need you to show her the ropes. Teach her how we grind here at Apex. My internal monologue instantly dissolved into a chaotic, screeching siren. An intern? In silk? She looks like she could buy this entire building, turn it into a private garage for her yachts, and fire me just for breathing her air. Why is she looking at me like that? Charlotte stepped forward, offering a hand. Her fingers were long, her nails painted a sheer, immaculate nude. It is a pleasure to meet you, Manager Fiona. I have heard so much about your exceptional standards. Her voice was low, smooth, and possessed a rich, velvety resonance that made my brain short-circuit like an old toaster dropped in a bathtub. I squeezed my coffee cup to ground myself, refusing to show a single crack in my professional armor. I shook her hand briefly, noting how impossibly soft her skin was. Nice to meet you, Charlotte. I hope you brought comfortable shoes. This isn't a country club. Oh, I am very good at adapting, Charlotte murmured, her dark eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me want to hide under my desk. Greg clapped his hands together, clearly eager to escape back to his office to play mobile golf. Excellent. I'll leave her in your capable hands, Fiona. Make us proud. The moment Greg scurried away, the atmosphere in my cubicle shifted. The air felt heavy, charged with a strange, static tension. Right. First rule of middle management. Assert dominance immediately. Do not let the gorgeous, wealthy-looking Nepo baby realize you are currently experiencing a severe, code-red gay panic. I cleared my throat, crossing my arms and leaning back in my mesh chair. So, Charlotte. No marketing experience, Greg said. What exactly did you major in? Art history and French literature, Charlotte replied, her lips curving into a small, infuriatingly beautiful smile. She leaned against the edge of my desk, entirely violating my personal space boundary of 2 feet. But I am a very fast learner, especially when I have a dedicated teacher. Art history, I repeated, letting out a flat, dry chuckle. Perfect. Just what we need to solve a $3 million inventory crisis for our clients. Let me make one thing clear. I don't do hand-holding, and I don't tolerate dead weight. If you can't keep up, I will personally recommend your termination to HR by the end of the week. I expected her to flinch, or at least look slightly intimidated. Instead, her smile only widened. I love a woman who knows exactly what she wants, Charlotte purred, her eyes dropping to my collarbone before rising back to meet my gaze. Please, give me your worst. My left eyelid twitched. Is she teasing me? And in turn, seducing her manager on day one? The sheer audacity of rich people is truly boundless. Fine, I said, grabbing a massive, dust-covered binder from the shelf behind me. I slammed it down on the desk. These are the raw, unstructured sales receipts from our main distributor for the last 3 years. I need every single transaction manually digitized, categorized by region, and cross-referenced with our current inventory. It is currently 10 a.m. I want a completed spreadsheet on my desk by exactly 5 p.m. It was a task designed to break her. It was a tedious, mind-numbing, finger-cramping nightmare that usually took a team of 3 juniors an entire weekend to complete. Understood, Charlotte said smoothly. She reached down to pick up the binder, but as she did, her elbow caught the edge of a stack of manila folders. The papers exploded across the carpeted floor. Oh, look at that. I am so clumsy, Charlotte sighed, though her voice lacked even a shred of genuine distress. She dropped to her knees to gather the scattered pages. Instinctively, I leaned down from my chair to help her, reaching for a stray marketing brief. Our hands brushed. A jolt of pure static electricity shot up my arm, causing me to gasp softly. Before I could pull away, Charlotte didn't rise. Instead, she leaned in closer, trapping me between my desk and her shoulder. She was so close I could smell her perfume, something expensive that smelled of wild figs, cedarwood, and rain. She leaned entirely too far into my personal space, her lips hovering just inches from my ear. You have such a deliciously strict tone, Manager Fiona, Charlotte whispered, her voice a low, dark purr that sent a wave of heat straight to my cheeks. It makes me wonder what else you're this demanding about. My brain completely emptied of all thoughts, words, and basic cognitive functions. Is this legal? Can I report an intern to HR for being too attractive? She is literally playing with me. She knows exactly what she is doing. See, get up, I stammered, my voice cracking slightly before I forced it back into a cold, commanding register. I pushed myself back in my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs. Get up and get to work, Charlotte. The clock is ticking. Charlotte stood up gracefully, holding the binder against her chest. She gave me a slow, calculated look, her eyes gleaming with absolute amusement, before walking over to the empty desk opposite mine. For the next 4 hours, I tried to focus, but it was impossible. Every time I looked up, Charlotte was staring at me over her laptop screen, tapping a sleek designer pen against her chin, a soft, knowing smirk playing on her lips. By 3 p.m., the tension was still simmering when a heavy shadow fell across my cubicle. It was Brad Vance. Brad was my direct rival for the upcoming promotion to marketing director. He was a master of corporate sabotage, famous for taking credit for other people's work and throwing his colleagues under the bus. Hey, Fiona, Brad said, leaning against my partition with a smug, punchable grin. I hear you're working on the Vanguard pitch for tomorrow's board meeting. Such a shame if your data isn't up to par. My data is flawless, Brad, I said coldly. And it's securely stored. Is it? Brad smirked, his eyes darting to my desk. Before I could react, his hand shot out, grabbing my silver USB drive, the only physical backup containing the entire Vanguard presentation, which was sitting right next to my coffee cup. I think I should take a look at this, Brad sneered, stepping backward. Just to make sure there are no errors. As a courtesy, of course. Put that back, Brad, I said, standing up, my blood running cold. If he took that drive, he would edit the slides to make me look incompetent, or worse, delete the files entirely. That is my intellectual property. Oh, come on, Fiona. Share and share alike, Brad laughed, turning to walk away. Suddenly, a blur of movement cut him off. Charlotte, who had been quietly sipping a large, steaming cup of iced matcha she had ordered, was suddenly standing directly in Brad's path. Oh! Charlotte let out a dramatic, breathy gasp as she tripped over her own feet. She pitched forward with perfect, terrifying precision. The entire contents of her massive cup of bright green, sticky, lukewarm matcha flew through the air in a perfect arc, landing squarely on Brad's chest, his expensive Italian leather shoes, and, most importantly, the open, high-end laptop he was carrying in his other hand. A sharp, crackling sound erupted from Brad's laptop as the green liquid seeped into the keyboard. The screen flickered violently before dying with a pathetic, high-pitched whine. "My laptop!" Brad shrieked, his face turning an angry shade of purple as the sticky green liquid dripped from his chin. My entire presentation was on there. "You stupid, clumsy bitch." Before Brad could raise his hand or step toward her, Charlotte's demeanor underwent a chilling, instantaneous transformation. The helpless, clumsy intern vanished. She stood up straight, her shoulders squaring, and looked down at Brad with a gaze so cold and razor-sharp it could have sliced through steel. "I would watch your tone if I were you, Mr. Vance," Charlotte said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet whisper that made even me take a step back. "Accidents happen. But calling a colleague names in a professional workspace? That is a very quick way to get your contract permanently terminated." Brad opened his mouth to shout, but something in Charlotte's eyes, an unspoken, terrifying authority, made him freeze. He looked at her, then at me, trembling with pure, unadulterated rage. You're both going to pay for this." Brad spat, clutching his ruined, dripping laptop to his chest as he turned and fled down the hallway toward the executive washroom. I stood there, my mouth slightly open, my brain trying to process what had just happened. Charlotte turned back to me. The icy, terrifying predator vanished instantly, replaced once again by the playful, teasing intern. She reached down to the carpet, picked up my silver USB drive, which she had somehow caught midair as Brad dropped it, and held it out to me. "I believe this belongs to you, Manager Fiona," Charlotte murmured, stepping close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her body. You did that on purpose," I whispered, my heart racing as I took the drive from her. Charlotte didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned in, her lips brushing the shell of my ear as she delivered a soft, dangerous promise. "I told you, Fiona. Nobody touches what is mine." Before I could unpack the terrifying implications of that sentence, she pulled back, shot me a slow, predatory, knowing wink, and walked back to her desk as if she hadn't just destroyed a man's career with a cup of green tea. My phone suddenly buzzed on my desk. It was an urgent, system-wide email notification from the HR department. Subject: Urgent announcement. Welcome our new Chief Executive Officer. I clicked it, my hand trembling. My eyes scanned the text, stopping dead on the official corporate headshot attached to the message. It was Charlotte. Chapter 2: The Overtime Trap. My brain did not just short-circuit, it experienced a complete, catastrophic grid failure. I stared at the high-resolution headshot in the HR email, then slowly looked over the top of my monitor. Across the partition, the supposedly clumsy, art history major intern was currently using a designer silk handkerchief to dab a tiny drop of green tea from her flawless ivory chin. "Is everything all right, Manager Fiona?" Charlotte asked, her voice dripping with an innocent, wide-eyed concern that suddenly felt incredibly dangerous. "You look as though you have just seen a ghost." "A ghost would be preferable," I muttered, my fingers trembling as I quickly closed the email tab. This is a sick joke. It has to be. The board of Apex Creative Group would not hire a 20-something runway model who drops binders and throws tea at people to run a multi-million-dollar marketing firm. There must be two Charlottes. Yes, a very common name. Extremely common. "Just some system updates," I lied, my voice carrying a shaky, high-pitched octave I desperately hoped she wouldn't notice. I cleared my throat, trying to summon every ounce of my fading authority. Anyway, back to work. Since you managed to ruin Mr. Vance's afternoon, we are now severely behind schedule. I am entirely at your disposal, Charlotte murmured, leaning her chin on her palm. Her dark eyes locked onto mine, harboring a deep, simmering amusement that told me she knew exactly what I had just read. I decided to play stupid. If she wanted to pretend to be an intern, I would treat her like one. In fact, I would make her regret this little corporate masquerade. Excellent, I said, putting on my best, most terrifying managerial smile. Because of the disruption, we have to manually re-verify the Q3 projected margins. That means we are staying late. Unpaid overtime, Charlotte. Welcome to the bottom of the food chain. Overtime. Charlotte's eyes lit up, not with dread, but with a predatory hunger that made my stomach do a highly unprofessional flip. Just the two of us? In a completely empty office? I cannot think of a better way to spend my evening. My left eyelid twitched again. She is doing this on purpose. She is actively hunting me, and I am sitting here in a polyester blend blazer acting like I have any control over my life. By 7 p.m., the rest of the floor was completely dark. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed a low, hypnotic tune, casting long shadows across the empty cubicles. I was busy typing a furious email to our logistics team when the scent of wild figs and cedarwood suddenly drifted into my workspace, followed by the soft rustle of paper bags. I took the liberty of ordering us a light snack, Charlotte announced, casually pushing my keyboard aside to lay down a spread of gold-foiled containers. I stared at the food. There was seared A5 Wagyu beef, black truffle risotto, and a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling cider that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Charlotte, I said, my voice flat as I looked from the luxury feast to her pristine silk blouse. This is not a light snack. This is a Michelin-starred felony. Where did you even get this? The only thing open within 5 miles is a greasy taco truck. I have a very reliable delivery service, Charlotte replied smoothly, handing me a heavy silver fork that she had definitely not found in the office break room. Eat, Fiona. You cannot run a $3 million account on cold coffee and spite. I have been doing exactly that for 4 years, I shot back, though the smell of the truffle risotto was rapidly breaking my resolve. I took a bite, and my taste buds instantly went to heaven. I had to actively fight the urge to make an embarrassing, highly undignified sound of pure satisfaction. Charlotte watched me eat, a soft, satisfied smile playing on her lips. See? Much better. Now, while you were busy writing angry emails, I took a look at your Q3 financial models. I nearly choked on my Wagyu. You did what? I told you to. Digitize receipts, not touch my proprietary models. Oh, the receipts were incredibly boring, Charlotte said, waving her hand dismissively as she strolled over to the glass whiteboard on the wall. And your model is far too conservative. You are capping your distribution channels at 20% to mitigate risk, but you are completely ignoring the tax write-offs from our secondary logistics partner. Before I could protest, she picked up a black dry erase marker. Her hand moved with a terrifying, fluid precision, sketching out complex algorithmic formulas and market projection curves that I had only ever seen in elite, Ivy League financial journals. She wasn't just fast, she was brilliant. She dismantled my 2 weeks of hard work and rebuilt it into a flawless, high-yield masterpiece in less than 5 minutes. She capped the marker with a sharp click and turned to face me, her eyes gleaming in the dim office light. What do you think, Manager Fiona? Am I keeping up? I sat frozen in my mesh chair, my fork suspended halfway to my mouth. She is a monster. A gorgeous, terrifying, financial genius of a monster. I want to fire her, and I also want her to explain corporate tax loopholes to me while holding my hand. What is wrong with me? It's acceptable, I managed to say, my voice raspy. I stood up, grabbing a stack of documents just to give my hands something to do. I need to go make some copies of these new models. Do not touch anything else. I practically fled the cubicle, marching down the dark hallway toward the copy machine at the far end of the floor. The heavy, rhythmic thumping of the copier was the only sound in the dead silence of the building. I leaned against the warm plastic of the machine, closed my eyes, and let out a long, shuddering breath. "Running away so soon, Fiona?" I gasped, my eyes flying open. Charlotte was standing right there. I hadn't even heard her approach. The copy machine's green light flashed, casting a rhythmic, eerie glow over her face. She stepped closer, trapping me between her body and the warm, humming machine. "I am not running away," I stammered, my back pressing hard against the copier. "I am copying. It is a very important managerial task." "Is it?" Charlotte murmured. She reached out, but instead of grabbing the papers, her hand brushed past my shoulder. Her long, cool fingers gently caught the lapel of my blazer. She slowly, meticulously adjusted my crooked collar, her knuckles lightly grazing the sensitive skin of my neck. Every nerve ending in my body went on high alert. My heart hammered so loudly against my ribs I was certain she could hear it. "Your collar is messy," Charlotte whispered, her voice dropping to a low, husky register that vibrated straight through my chest. "And for someone who claims to be so strict, you are incredibly easy to fluster." "Charlotte, this is highly inappropriate," I whispered back, though I made absolutely no effort to push her away. "I am your manager." "For now," she agreed, her lips curving into a dangerous, slow smile. She leaned in closer, her breath smelling of faint sweetness and mint, hovering just inches from my face. But corporate structures can be so fragile. One day you're on top, and the next, you find yourself completely at the mercy of someone else. She gave my collar one final, gentle pat, her eyes dropping to my lips for an agonizingly long second before she stepped back, releasing me from her invisible cage. "I will go pack up my desk," she said smoothly, her tone returning to its professional, polite mask as if she hadn't just evaporated my entire nervous system. "It is getting late." 10 minutes later, we walked out of the empty office building and into the cool night air. The city streets were quiet, illuminated by the orange glow of the street lamps. I was about to offer to call her a cab, mostly to prove I was still the responsible adult in this dynamic, when a sleek, black luxury SUV with heavily tinted windows silently pulled up to the curb. The door opened instantly. A tall man in a tailored dark suit and a security earpiece stepped out, bowing deeply at the waist. "Good evening, ma'am," the head of security said, his voice solemn and respectful. "The board of directors is prepared for your formal transition meeting tomorrow morning at 9. I froze on the sidewalk, my jaw dropping. Charlotte didn't even blink. She slipped into the plush leather backseat of the SUV with an effortless, practiced grace, then turned to look at me through the open door. "Thank you for the wonderful first day, Manager Fiona," Charlotte said, her eyes glittering with absolute, unadulterated amusement. "I look forward to our close collaboration tomorrow." The security guard closed the door with a heavy, expensive thud. As the SUV pulled away into the night, I caught a glimpse of Charlotte's face through the tinted glass. She was looking back at me, a slow, predatory smirk playing on her lips, her fingers casually playing with the silver USB drive she had rescued earlier. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. It was a calendar invite for tomorrow's 9 a.m. board meeting. Organizer, Charlotte Vane, Chief Executive Officer. Required attendee, Fiona Lin. Description: Private Performance Review. Chapter 3. The Boardroom Slapdown. My alarm did not wake me up at 6 o'clock in the morning. My sheer, unadulterated terror did. By the time I arrived at the office at 8:30, I was operating entirely on 3 hours of fitful sleep, 2 extra-large cold brews, and a level of adrenaline usually reserved for people leaping out of burning planes. I stared at the closed double doors of the executive boardroom on the top floor, my hand frozen on the brass handle. The calendar invite had said private performance review, but the sheer size of the mahogany table visible through the glass panels suggested otherwise. It was a firing squad masquerading as a meeting. Going inside, Fiona? Or are you planning to photosynthesize out here in the hallway? I jumped, spinning around to see Greg Sterling standing behind me. He looked disgustingly cheerful, wearing a pastel blue suit that smelled heavily of expensive mints and desperation. Good morning, Greg, I said, forcing my customer service voice into overdrive as I adjusted the strap of my laptop bag. I assumed this was a private meeting with the new executive leadership. Oh, it is, Greg chuckled, a greasy, condescending sound that made my teeth grind. He pushed past me, opening the heavy doors. But as the director of marketing, I could hardly let my star manager navigate a transition audit alone. Besides, we need to address some structural discrepancies in your third-quarter projections. I followed him into the room, my stomach instantly dropping into my leather heels. The room was already half full of senior board members, all of them looking incredibly severe in their charcoal suits. But my eyes immediately locked onto the figure sitting at the far end of the massive table. Charlotte was there. She wasn't wearing her intern uniform today. Instead, she wore a sharp, custom-tailored charcoal three-piece suit that hugged her shoulders with military precision. Her dark hair was styled in a sleek, high ponytail, and her gold-rimmed glasses were pushed up onto her head. She looked every inch the ruthless, high-society executive she actually was. But as I walked in, her dark eyes found mine, and the corners of her lips twitched into that familiar, devastatingly playful smirk. She slowly slid a gold pen between her long fingers, giving me a tiny, practically imperceptible nod. She is literally playing a villain in a prestige drama, and I am the extra who is about to get written off in the first act. Keep it together, Fiona. You are a professional. You do not sweat in front of billionaires. Please sit, Greg said, gesturing magnanimously to a chair at the middle of the table, as if he owned the building. He took the seat right next to mine, immediately opening his slim leather portfolio. I sat down, keeping my posture rigid. I set my laptop on the table, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Before we begin the formal transition presentation, Greg announced, clearing his throat to capture the attention of the board members, I want to address a critical issue regarding our primary distribution accounts. Specifically, the Vanguard account. I frowned, a cold prickle of unease washing over me. Greg, the Vanguard data is fully finalized. The model is completely secure. It is secure, yes, but unfortunately, it is also highly flawed, Greg said, sighing with a dramatic, performative weight that made me want to lob my water glass at his nose. He clicked a button on the presentation remote, projecting a slide onto the massive screen at the front of the room. As you can see, Manager Fiona's conservative model would have capped our third-quarter distribution channels at a mere 20%, severely limiting our reach. The board members began to mutter among themselves, casting displeased glances in my direction. I had to step in personally over the weekend to draft a correction, Greg continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Fiona is a dedicated worker, of course, but her risk-averse tendencies have put our $3 million target in serious jeopardy. I believe a formal restructuring of her department is required. My blood turned to ice. This absolute spineless parasite. He is taking my original, safe numbers, the ones Charlotte and I literally fixed last night, and claiming I was the one who messed them up to cover his own historical budget deficits. Greg, that is entirely untrue, I said, my voice tight as I stood up, refusing to let him execute me in silence. The model you are displaying on that screen is an outdated draft. The finalized model, which was uploaded to the secure server at midnight, includes a highly optimized tax write-off structure from our secondary logistics partner. Oh, Fiona, please, Greg patronizingly waved his hand, not even looking at me. We all know you've been under a lot of stress. Trying to manage the workload while training a completely unqualified intern must have been exhausting. There is no shame in admitting you slipped up. Actually, she didn't. The voice was quiet, but it possessed a cold, commanding resonance that instantly cut through the room like a physical blade. Every head at the table turned toward the far end of the room. Charlotte slowly leaned back in her high-backed leather chair. She didn't look angry. She looked utterly, profoundly bored. Charlotte, please, Greg laughed nervously, his face twitching slightly as he glanced at the board members. We are in the middle of an executive board review. This is highly inappropriate for a temporary assistant to Shut up, Greg. Charlotte didn't raise her voice, but the sheer, icy authority in those 3 words made Greg freeze mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open like a landed bass. With an agonizingly slow, deliberate movement, Charlotte lifted her legs and kicked her designer leather heels up onto the edge of the pristine mahogany table. She crossed her ankles, resting her hands behind her head as she stared directly at Greg. The silence in the room was so thick you could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Your suit is cheap, your cologne is offensive, and your math is an absolute embarrassment to this firm, Charlotte said smoothly, her eyes narrowing behind her gold-rimmed glasses. You're presenting a model that was discarded 2 weeks ago. Furthermore, you have conveniently omitted the $40,000 logistics discrepancy from the southern region, the very discrepancy you attempted to write off as an administrative error. Greg's face rapidly drained of color, turning a sickly, translucent shade of gray. I have no idea what you're implying, miss. I am not implying anything, Charlotte interrupted, her tone sharp enough to draw blood. She reached down, picked up her gold pen, and pointed it at the projection screen. I am stating, as a matter of mathematical certainty, that you have been embezzling from the operational budget to fund your personal entertainment expenses. Specifically, a corporate golf membership that you registered under the name of a shell vendor. That's a lie. Greg stammered, his voice rising to a frantic, high-pitched squeak as he looked at the board members for help. None of them met his eyes. You're just an intern. Who do you think you are? She is the chief executive officer, I said, my own voice surprisingly steady as I looked from Greg's trembling form to Charlotte's smug, beautiful face. I cannot believe I am currently watching my absolute nightmare of an intern perform a flawless, high-stakes corporate execution. She is terrifying. She is magnificent. I want to buy her a coffee, and I also want to run away to another continent. Exactly, Charlotte murmured, her eyes shifting to me, the coldness instantly melting into a warm, predatory gaze that made my lungs feel entirely too tight. And as the CEO, Greg, I am officially relieving you of your duties. You have 10 minutes to clear your desk before security escorts you from the building. Greg opened his mouth to protest, but the sheer weight of Charlotte's gaze seemed to crush the air right out of his chest. He slumped back into his chair, looking utterly defeated, before gathering his papers with trembling hands and practically fleeing the room. The remaining board members sat in stunned silence, staring at the young woman who had just dismantled a 15-year veteran of the company in less than 3 minutes. Charlotte slowly lowered her feet from the table, smoothing down the front of her tailored trousers. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the mahogany surface as her gaze locked onto me. Now, Charlotte said, her voice dropping to that low, velvety register that made my internal compass spin wildly. As for manager Fiona, I believe her exceptional performance under extreme duress warrants a highly personalized review. The rest of you may leave. The board members didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled out of their seats, practically tripping over each other to exit the room, leaving the heavy double doors to swing shut behind them. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stood by my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs as Charlotte slowly stood up and began to walk down the length of the long table toward me. Charlotte, I started, my voice trembling slightly as I tried to summon my fading professional armor. You lied to me. You let me treat you like an errand girl. You let me assign you 3 years of manual data entry. And you were so wonderfully strict about it, Charlotte purred, stopping just a foot away from me. The scent of wild figs and cedarwood washed over me, instantly scrambled my thoughts. I found your managerial style highly stimulating. You are a menace, I whispered, backing up until my waist pressed against the edge of the table. You hijacked my department. You ruined Brad's laptop. You practically forced me to stay late just to watch me panic. I did, Charlotte admitted, her dark eyes glittering with absolute, unadulterated amusement as she stepped closer, trapping me against the mahogany wood. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. You are incredibly beautiful when you are angry, Fiona. My brain went completely offline. Did she just call me beautiful? In the executive boardroom? while her father's company is undergoing a massive transition. She is insane. We are both going to get fired by the board of directors. Charlotte, we are in a professional environment, I stammered, my fingers gripping the edge of the table behind me. You are my boss. This is highly inappropriate. Is it? Charlotte murmured, leaning in close enough that her breath brushed my cheek. But you were the one who told me that corporate structures are fragile, Manager Fiona. One day you're on top and the next. Before she could finish the sentence, the heavy oak double doors of the boardroom banged open with a sharp, echoing thud. I gasped, instinctively trying to push Charlotte away, but she barely budged, her dark eyes turning toward the entrance with a sudden, sharp irritation. A tall, elegant woman with striking silver hair and a diamond necklace that probably cost more than my entire apartment building strode into the room. Her expression was a mix of cold amusement and mild annoyance as she looked directly at Charlotte. Are you quite done playing undercover in middle management, sweetheart? Victoria Vane, the billionaire chairwoman of Vane Enterprises, asked, her voice dripping with aristocratic sarcasm. The legal team has been waiting in the penthouse for 20 minutes. Charlotte didn't even flinch. She slowly stepped back from me, smoothing her collar with an effortless grace that made my jaw drop. I was just finalizing my first executive assessment, Mother, Charlotte said smoothly, her tone turning instantly professional as she shot me one final, slow, predatory wink. And I must say, the local talent is exceptional. Chapter 4. The Predator Drops the Mask. My legs felt like overcooked spaghetti as I practically floated back to my cubicle on the 4th floor. The corporate office of Apex Creative Group was completely silent, but to me, it felt like a ticking bomb. I sat down in my mesh chair, staring at my monitor with wide, unblinking eyes while my brain processed the absolute disaster of my life. I had spent the last 7 days bossing around, scolding and assigning mind-numbing manual labor to the actual billionaire heiress of our entire parent company. I had threatened to report her to human resources. I had literally told her she was at the bottom of the food chain while wearing a $50 blazer from a discount department store. I am dead. I am legally, professionally, and socially deceased. They are going to blackball me from the entire marketing industry, and I will end up having to sell hand-knitted cat sweaters on the internet just to pay my rent. With trembling fingers, I opened a blank document on our secure internal network. I didn't even bother to close the marketing files. I just began to type a formal letter of resignation. To the board of directors, I muttered, my keyboard clacking furiously under the weight of my panic. Please accept this letter as formal notification that I am resigning from my position as marketing manager, effective immediately, due to sudden, unforeseen medical reasons. Specifically, an acute case of terminal embarrassment. I printed the document, signed it with a cheap black pen, and shoved it into a crisp white envelope. I packed my laptop, my favorite coffee mug, and my small desktop succulent into my canvas tote bag. I was not going to wait for security to escort me out of the building. I was going to execute a tactical retreat while I still had a shred of my dignity left. I slung my bag over my shoulder, took one last look at my empty cubicle, and marched toward the elevators at the far end of the hallway. Every step felt like a march to the gallows, my eyes darting around to see if any of my colleagues were watching the disgraced manager make her quiet escape. The chrome elevator doors slid open with a soft, electronic chime. I stepped inside, immediately hitting the button for the ground floor, desperately wishing the machine would move at the speed of light. But just as the heavy doors began to slide shut, a slender, elegant hand in a dark charcoal sleeve blocked the sensor. The doors immediately retracted. My heart stopped dead in my chest. Charlotte stepped into the elevator. She was alone now, her mother and the intimidating legal team nowhere to be seen. She had removed her structured suit jacket, draping it casually over one arm, leaving her in a tailored white silk vest that showed off the sharp curve of her collarbones. Leaving without saying goodbye, Manager Fiona? Charlotte asked, her voice sliding over me like rich, dark honey. She didn't wait for an answer. She reached out, her fingers brushing past mine as she pressed a large red button on the control panel, pulling it outward with a sharp, heavy click. The elevator groaned, instantly grinding to a halt between the 12th and 11th floors. The overhead lights flickered once before settling into a warm, dim standby mode. My back hit the cold steel wall of the elevator cabin, my hands clutching my tote bag like a shield. Charlotte, what are you doing? This is a serious safety violation. Put the elevator back in motion. I am the Chief Executive Officer, Fiona, Charlotte murmured, taking a slow, deliberate step toward me. I believe I am allowed to dictate elevator maintenance schedules. You are a menace, I stammered, my voice cracking slightly as she closed the distance between us. You lied to me. You let me treat you like an errand girl. You let me assign you 3 years of manual data entry. And you were so wonderfully strict about it, Charlotte purred, stopping just a single foot away from me. The scent of wild figs and cedarwood washed over me, instantly scrambling my thoughts and making my throat go dry. I found your managerial style highly stimulating. She is insane. She is a gorgeous, predatory billionaire who has locked me in a metal box, and I am currently experiencing a level of gay panic that should be clinically impossible. This is highly inappropriate, I said, trying to summon the last frozen remnants of my professional voice. I was your manager. But as of 5 minutes ago, I am no longer an employee of this company. I reached into my bag, pulled out the white envelope, and held it out between us like a physical barrier. My formal resignation. I expect my final paycheck to be mailed to my apartment. Charlotte didn't take the envelope. Instead, she looked at it with a soft, amused chuckle, her dark eyes glittering behind her gold-rimmed glasses. A resignation letter? Charlotte asked, her tone dripping with mock pity. How delightfully old-fashioned. With an agonizingly slow, deliberate movement, her long fingers closed over the paper. But instead of tucking it away, she gripped both ends of the envelope and tore it clean down the middle with a sharp, decisive rip. Charlotte, I gasped, my jaw dropping as the pieces of my career fluttered to the carpeted floor. You can't just destroy legal documents. I can do whatever I want, Fiona, Charlotte whispered, stepping even closer, her body nearly pressing against mine. She reached behind her back, sliding a sleek, black leather portfolio out from under her suit jacket. Besides, you won't be needing that. Your new employment contract is already drafted. She opened the portfolio, presenting a thick stack of heavy, high-grade cream paper with the gold-embossed seal of Vane Enterprises at the top. My eyes instinctively scanned the first page, my brain struggling to process the bold text. Vice President of Global Brand Strategy? Charlotte, this is an executive-level promotion. The starting salary is $250,000. A fair price for keeping my marketing department from collapsing, Charlotte said smoothly, her eyes dropping to my lips for a torturous second before rising to lock onto mine. You're brilliant, Fiona. Your Q3 models were flawless. I don't let talent like yours walk out the door. But I can't accept this, I protested, my chest heaving as I tried to find a logical exit from her web. It's a conflict of interest. We have, whatever this is. This is highly unprofessional. Oh, it gets much worse, Charlotte murmured, her lips curving into a dangerous, slow smirk. Turn to page 4. Subsection 12. My fingers shook as I flipped the heavy pages, my eyes landing on the highlighted clause near the bottom of the document. Subsection 12. Exclusive personal liaison. The newly appointed vice president shall report directly and exclusively to the chief executive officer. Due to the high-security nature of transition operations, the vice president must remain on call 24 hours a day for private consultations, strategic planning sessions, and mandatory travel arrangements at the sole discretion of the CEO. My brain went completely offline. 24 hours a day? Exclusive personal liaison? Charlotte, this isn't a corporate contract. This is a kidnapping agreement with benefits. It is an exclusive partnership, Manager Fiona, Charlotte corrected, her voice dropping to a low, husky whisper as she leaned in close enough that her breath brushed my cheek. You liked bossing me around when I was at the bottom of the food chain. Now, I think it is my turn to give the orders. She reached out, her cool fingers gently catching my chin, tilting my head up slightly, so I had no choice but to look into her dark, mesmerizing eyes. So tell me, Fiona, Charlotte whispered, her thumb lightly grazing my bottom lip, sending a jolt of heat straight to my toes. Are you going to sign the contract? Or do I need to find other ways to convince you? Before I could answer, Charlotte reached past my shoulder and slapped the red emergency button back into place. The elevator let out a sharp chime, the bright white overhead lights snapping back on as the cabin resumed its smooth, downward descent toward the ground floor. The chrome doors slid open, revealing the bustling, marble-floored lobby of Apex Creative Group. Charlotte stepped back from me with an effortless, transition-perfect grace, her professional mask slipping back over her features as if she hadn't just evaporated my entire nervous system in a stalled elevator. Take the evening to think about it, Vice President Fiona, Charlotte said smoothly, giving me one final, slow, predatory wink as she stepped out of the cabin. My driver will pick you up at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Do not make me wait. Chapter 5. Checkmate in the Corner Office. I spent the entire night staring at page 4 of the contract on my kitchen counter. My cat, who has no concept of corporate espionage or crippling gay panic, sat on top of subsection 12 as if it were a heated blanket. I drank 4 cups of chamomile tea, which did absolutely nothing to soothe the screaming sirens in my brain. The vice president must remain on call 24 hours a day for private consultations. It was a trap, beautifully laid out on high-grade cream paper with gold embossing. I was being offered a massive salary, a corner office, and a complete fast track to the top of the marketing world, but the catch was that I had to sign myself over to a predatory billionaire who found my panic stimulating. At precisely 7:40 the next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your ride is downstairs, Vice President Fiona. Do not keep me waiting. I let out a shaky breath, smoothed the front of my $50 discount blazer, and walked out of my apartment building. A sleek, black luxury SUV was idling at the curb, its engine humming like a sleeping beast. The silent, imposing driver from the night before opened the door for me, bowing slightly as I climbed into the leather-scented sanctuary of the back seat. The drive to the corporate headquarters of Apex Creative Group felt like a countdown to an execution. We bypassed the main lobby entirely, the driver escorting me to a private executive elevator that required a gold key card to access. The ride to the penthouse floor was so smooth and fast my ears popped, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a sprawling, minimalist penthouse office. The floor was solid white marble, and the walls were entirely made of floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a dizzying, panoramic view of the entire city skyline. Charlotte was sitting behind a massive, floating desk made of dark glass, her gold-rimmed glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed digital documents on a tablet. She had reverted to her CEO persona, wearing a tailored navy three-piece suit that looked sharp enough to cut glass, but the moment she saw me, her professional mask instantly shattered into a slow, wicked smirk. Good morning, Fiona, Charlotte said, her voice sliding across the cold marble floor like warm silk. You look delightfully sleep-deprived. I spent the night reading your ridiculous kidnapping agreement, I said, marching across the office and slamming the heavy leather portfolio down onto her glass desk. I prefer to call it a highly customized employment agreement, Charlotte replied smoothly, leaning back in her leather chair and crossing her legs. Subsection 12 is not a standard corporate clause, Charlotte, I said, crossing my arms and trying to summon every ounce of my fading authority. 24 hours a day? On call for private consultations? I am a marketing strategist, not your personal butler. You are whatever I need you to be, Fiona, Charlotte murmured, her dark eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my knees feel dangerously weak. We need boundaries, I insisted, taking a step closer to the desk and leaning forward. If I accept this promotion, our relationship must remain strictly professional. No more elevator lockdowns, no more whispering in my ear, and absolutely no more teasing. And if I refuse those terms? Charlotte asked, a playful challenge dancing in her eyes. Then I walk, I declared, trying to sound 100% more confident than I actually felt. I will take my talents to our direct competitor, and you can try to run your marketing department without me. Charlotte didn't look threatened. She looked utterly, profoundly delighted. She slowly stood up from her chair, her long legs moving with a graceful, predatory rhythm as she walked around the edge of the glass desk. I instinctively tried to take a step back, but she was too fast, her hand reaching out to catch my wrist with a firm, cool grip. You are so adorable when you try to negotiate, Manager Fiona, Charlotte whispered, her voice dropping to that low, husky register that always scrambled my brain. Before I could protest, she gave my wrist a firm, decisive pull. My balance evaporated, and my heels slid on the polished marble floor. Instead of crashing onto the glass desk, I landed squarely on Charlotte's lap as she sat back against the edge of the mahogany credenza behind her. My brain completely flatlined. I was sitting on the lap of the Billionaire Chief Executive Officer, my hands instinctively gripping her tailored shoulders for support, while the entire city skyline stretched out behind us through the massive glass windows. Charlotte, I gasped, my face burning with a heat that could have melted polar ice caps. This is a massive HR violation. Get me off your lap. I am the owner of this company, Fiona. Charlotte laughed softly, her hands sliding casually around my waist to lock me in place. I am the HR department. You're a menace, I stammered, my heart beating so loudly I was certain she could feel it through her silk vest. Why are you doing this? Out of all the marketing managers in the city, why are you targeting me? Because you promised me you would, Charlotte murmured, her thumbs lightly tracing the fabric of my blazer. I blinked, my panic momentarily pausing to make room for absolute confusion. What? I never promised you anything. We met 3 days ago. We met 6 months ago, Fiona, Charlotte corrected, her eyes glittering with a mixture of amusement and deep tenderness. She reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out her phone, and tapped the screen before sliding it across the credenza toward me. On the screen was a high-resolution photograph taken at a high-end charity gala. In the photo, I was wearing a rented, slightly crooked evening gown, holding a glass of cheap Prosecco, and pointing a very finger-gun-shaped hand directly at Charlotte, who was wearing an elegant black tuxedo. A sudden, horrifying wave of memory crashed over my brain. 6 months ago, I had attended a charity gala as a seat filler for our former director. I had gotten aggressively, embarrassingly tipsy on free champagne, and I had wandered into the VIP garden lounge, where I had spotted a gorgeous, quiet woman hiding from a crowd of sycophants. I had staggered over to her, completely unaware that she was the billionaire heiress to Vane Enterprises. I remember, I whispered, my jaw dropping as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place with a horrifying, click-clack precision. Do you? Charlotte purred, her lips hovering just inches from my ear. Do you remember what you said to me, Fiona? My internal monologue was currently experiencing a Category 5 hurricane. I had looked at the most powerful woman in the room, poked her in the chest, and told her that she looked too stressed. I had told her that she needed a real manager to show her how to actually relax, and that if she ever came to Apex Creative Group, I would boss her around so good her head would spin. I was drunk, I squeaked, wishing the marble floor would open up and swallow me whole. I didn't know who you were. I know, Charlotte whispered, her breath brushing my cheek. But you were the first person in 5 years who didn't look at me and see a bank account. You looked at me and saw a person. And you promised to show me how a real manager runs things. So you pretended to be an intern just to hold me to a drunken promise? I asked, my voice barely a whisper as the sheer, romantic absurdity of it settled over me. I wanted to see if the fierce, brilliant woman from the gala was real, Charlotte admitted, her gaze dropping to my lips. And you were even better than I remembered. You protected your data, you saved your team, and you looked incredibly beautiful while doing it. You're insane, I murmured, though my hands had stopped trying to push her away, my fingers gently curling into the fabric of her tailored suit jacket. I am completely mad for you, Fiona, Charlotte corrected, her hand gently rising to cup my chin, tilting my head up. So, sign the contract. Let me be your exclusive personal liaison. Is that a threat, Chief Executive Officer? I asked, a tiny, defiant smile finally breaking through my panic. It is a promise, Vice President Fiona, Charlotte whispered. And before I could formulate another sarcastic retort, she leaned in, her lips pressing against mine in a warm, slow, and utterly devastating kiss that officially sealed my career and my heart forever. Happy ending. Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Thank you so much for listening. I'm AIE0. See you next time.